He slammed his hand on the cafe table and said, "My daughter doesn't wait." The world adjusts. The waiter froze, still holding 2 coffees mid-air. The girl was calmly pouring sugar onto the floor like she owned gravity. I remember thinking this would end in an apology. It didn't. That was the moment I realized some parents don't raise children anymore, they negotiate reality around them. You think this is just bad manners? Wait until you see what happens by story 3. I was at a quiet breakfast cafe in Vienna when a mother brought in her son and immediately asked if the background music could be less emotionally limiting. The waiter blinked. "It's just piano," he said. The kid started tapping 2 spoons together, off rhythm, aggressively confident. The mother smiled proudly at me and said, "He's experimenting with sound authority. We try not to interrupt creative leadership this early." The waiter offered to move them to a corner. She declined. "Isolation damages expressive momentum," she explained. Her son then stood on the chair and began conducting invisible musicians, knocking over a glass in the process. I instinctively reached to help clean it. She stopped me mid-motion. "Please don't interfere," she said softly. "He needs to experience consequence as a fluid concept, not a fixed outcome imposed by others." When the bill came, she refused to pay for the broken glass. "That was part of his process," she said. The waiter stood there, exhausted. I watched the kid smear jam across the table like a signature. She leaned toward me and whispered, "You're witnessing early genius." I nodded slowly. Not because I agreed, but because arguing felt like stepping into a conversation that didn't follow rules anymore. At a boutique hotel in Berlin, I watched a father reject 3 different rooms because his daughter didn't resonate with the hallway energy. The receptionist offered alternatives, clearly confused but trying. The girl was lying on the floor, spinning slowly. The father leaned over the desk and said, "She aligns better with spaces that acknowledge her presence. This building feels indifferent." They were eventually offered a suite upgrade. He stepped inside, closed his eyes, and inhaled deeply. "This one listens," he said. The receptionist stared like he had just witnessed performance art without context. The daughter walked to the mirror, waved at herself, then asked, "Does this room like me?" The father nodded. "It's already responding." I checked in behind them, suddenly aware I might be sleeping in a building with emotional opinions. Later that night, I heard knocking in the hallway. It was him. "Quick question," he said. "Has your room acknowledged you yet?" I paused. "No." He looked concerned. "That's something to monitor." Then he handed me a small crystal and said, "Just in case your space is resisting connection." I locked my door slowly after he left, unsure whether I was in a hotel or accidentally part of someone's belief system. That's when I started noticing the pattern. It wasn't just bad behavior, it was reframing. Everything became something deeper, more important, more untouchable. Noise became expression. Entitlement became sensitivity. Boundaries became oppression. And once everything is redefined like that, you can't argue anymore. Because you're not disagreeing with behavior, you're apparently attacking identity, growth, or something equally impossible to challenge without looking like the villain. I was at a kid's birthday party in London when a mother showed up with 3 children, even though only one was invited. She looked around at the decorations and said, "Good, this feels scalable." My friend, the host, politely explained the guest limit. The mother smiled like she'd just heard something adorable. "We don't separate siblings," she said. Meanwhile, one kid was already opening gifts that clearly weren't his. Another one had found the cake and started testing the frosting with his fingers. The invited child, her nephew, was sitting quietly, watching everything unravel. My friend gently repeated that there were only enough party favors for invited guests. The mother's expression changed instantly. "So you're creating hierarchy between children?" she asked. The entire room went quiet in that specific way where everyone suddenly becomes very interested in balloons. When the cake was served, she demanded equal portions for all 3 kids to maintain emotional fairness. My friend refused. The mother leaned down to the birthday girl and said, "I hope when you're excluded someday, you remember this feeling." I felt something shift in the room, not loud, not dramatic, just uncomfortable. Then one of her kids knocked over the drink table, and she sighed like we had all failed a lesson we didn't know we were taking. I was on a train in Prague when a mother asked everyone in our carriage to lower their presents. At first, people thought she meant volume. But no. She clarified. "Your energy is overwhelming my son." The kid was sitting perfectly still, staring at nothing. A man across from me slowly closed his laptop. "Is this better?" he asked. She shook her head. "It's not physical. It's atmospheric." She then stood up and started repositioning people. "You, less forward. You maybe angle your body away." Nobody moved. The conductor eventually arrived, confused by the silence. She explained that the carriage needed emotional rebalancing. The conductor blinked twice and said, "This is second class." That somehow offended her more than anything else. "Exactly," she said. "So let's act like a second chance for humanity." When no one complied, she sat back down, whispering loudly to her son, "They're not ready for your frequency yet." The train continued like nothing happened. But something had shifted. Not in energy, in patience. I noticed people avoiding eye contact, like we had collectively agreed this was easier than engaging. The kid never reacted. Just sat there, quietly, like the only normal person in the entire situation. At a museum in Paris, I watched a father let his daughter stand inches away from a glass case containing a centuries-old artifact. "Go ahead," he said. "Feel its story." The girl pressed her hands against the glass, breathing on it. A guard approached quickly. "Please step back." The father didn't move. "She's connecting," he said. The guard repeated himself, firmer this time. The father finally turned and smiled calmly. "You're interrupting something ancient," he said. The guard looked like he had heard every excuse in the world, just not this one. "Sir, it's a protected object." The girl tapped the glass lightly. "It's sad," she said. The father nodded. "It remembers being touched." I felt something in the air, not mystical, just deeply uncomfortable. When the guard insisted again, the father stepped closer to him and said, "Do you always silence history when it tries to speak?" That was the moment security got involved. As they escorted him out, he kept repeating, "She was almost there." The girl waved at the artifact as they left, like saying goodbye to something alive. And somehow, that made it worse. There's a strange confidence in all of this. Not loud, not aggressive, just absolute. The kind that doesn't ask, doesn't check, doesn't adjust. It assumes correctness as a starting point. And when you start from that place, every pushback feels like injustice. Every boundary feels personal. And every other person becomes either an obstacle or someone who just doesn't understand yet. I was on a 5-hour flight when a mother asked me to switch seats so her son could expand properly. I was in the aisle. She was in the middle. I politely declined. She nodded slowly, like she was processing something disappointing but expected. Then she stood there. Just stood. Watching me. "He doesn't compress well," she said after a long silence. Her son was already asleep, completely folded into the seat like it didn't matter. I pointed that out. She smiled. "That's because he's learned to shrink in environments like this." I didn't respond. She stayed there, holding onto the seat in front of me, refusing to move. Eventually, a flight attendant came over. "Is everything okay?" she asked. The mother turned to her and said, "I'm just witnessing resistance in real time." The flight attendant blinked. You need to return to your seat." She sighed dramatically, like she had just lost a philosophical debate. "We'll remember this," she said quietly, then sat down. The rest of the flight was silent. But every time I moved, I could feel her watching, like I had failed something invisible. At this point I thought I'd seen the peak. I hadn't even come close. At a bookstore in Amsterdam, I saw a mother guiding her son through the shelves like it was a strategy session. Pick something that reflects your narrative, she said. The kid grabbed a comic book. She shook her head. Too linear. The clerk offered help. We have recommendations if you'd like. She smiled politely. We don't follow external curation. The clerk handed the boy a simple novel. This one's good, he said. The mother took it, flipped through 2 pages, then closed it slowly. Where's the transformation framework? She asked. The clerk hesitated. It's a story. She nodded. Exactly the problem. The boy looked between them, unsure which reality he was supposed to follow. Eventually, he put the book back, like choosing incorrectly might have consequences. As they left, she told him, we don't consume narratives. We build them. The door closed behind them, and the clerk just stood there, holding a book that suddenly felt like it needed permission to exist. I realized something then, not every moment was chaotic. Some were quiet. But the control was still there. Just softer. More polished. And somehow, that made it harder to argue against. I was at a public park in Madrid when a father approached me while my dog was playing fetch. Can you stop that? He asked. I thought he meant noise. Stop what? He pointed at my dog. That behavior is distracting my son. The kid was sitting on the bench, staring at my dog like it was a TV he couldn't pause. He wants the ball, the father added. I laughed slightly, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. Then he can throw it, I said. The father shook his head. He shouldn't have to compete with an animal for engagement. I blinked. It's a dog. He stepped closer. Exactly. So remove it from the equation. That was the moment I realized this wasn't going to stay normal. When I refused, he took a step toward my dog like he was about to take the ball himself. I moved between them. Don't, I said. He raised his hands calmly. I'm advocating for my child. The kid hadn't moved. Not once. Just watching. Eventually, the father sighed. People like you create unnecessary resistance. Then walked away, like I had just denied something reasonable. And that's the core of it. Everything becomes reasonable if you redefine the rules enough. Ownership becomes optional. Space becomes negotiable. Other people become variables. And once you reach that point, nothing feels extreme anymore. Not to them. Only to everyone else watching, trying to figure out how something so obviously wrong is being explained so calmly. This last one. I still don't have a clean explanation for it. I was at a hospital waiting room when a mother walked in with her teenage son and immediately went to the front desk. We need priority, she said. The receptionist asked what the emergency was. The mother gestured vaguely. He's been feeling overlooked. The receptionist paused. I'm sorry, medically. The mother shook her head. Emotionally. But it's starting to affect his presence. There were people sitting around us, one holding an ice pack to his face, another coughing into a towel. The receptionist explained they had to prioritize physical emergencies. The mother smiled, patient but firm. That's outdated thinking. The son stood behind her, scrolling on his phone, completely detached. He's been invisible in group settings, she continued. That's long-term damage. When they were told to wait, she didn't sit down. She stayed at the desk. So you're choosing visible injuries over internal collapse, she asked. The receptionist nodded slowly, clearly trying to stay professional. Yes. The mother turned slightly, addressing the room. This is why people suffer silently. Nobody responded. Not because they agreed, but because no one wanted to enter that conversation. After 20 minutes, she walked out, shaking her head like the system had failed her personally. The son followed, still on his phone. The room exhaled, not dramatically, just enough to feel it. And I sat there thinking, it's not just the behavior. It's the certainty behind it. That quiet, unshakable belief that the world should adjust. Not sometimes. Always.